Welcome to the Darkstream. Voxday, voxday.net, and unauthorized.tv. Welcome to Stupid Question Day, Naked Bloodlust edition. There's not actually much significance to that other than the fact that the phrase appeared in one of the questions, so don't be alarmed. It's just a reference point. So you know how this works. A bunch of subscribers put questions up on Social Galactic. If you're not subscribing to unauthorized TV yet, you should do so, because then you can join in the conversation, ask questions at Stupid Question Day, all that sort of thing. I'm obviously going early tonight because we got a lot of questions. We may be here for a while. So let's get going. Robert says, how long can the emergent pattern of listing black and Latinx felons as white in legal records be sustained in the USA? It can be sustained until the USA falls apart. There's absolutely no pressure whatsoever on the people who are keeping track of these statistics to make them more accurate, to present a more accurate picture of crime in the United States. In fact, what we've seen is that the reporting has actually gotten less honest and less informative over time. So thinking that's going to change back, I wouldn't count on it. Hausfrau says, what can I do to protect my kids from being drafted and used as cannon fodder? Well, probably the most useful thing you can do is find out now what disqualifies an individual from serving, and make sure that you get some sort of doctor's evidence, et cetera, that actually applies. I wouldn't worry too terribly much about it, just because I don't think that that's the direction things are going. The U.S. is not going to get involved in a direct land war against Russia, in Russia. And the U.S. does not have the shipbuilding capacity or the plane building capacity to require large numbers of sailors or airmen. So, I wouldn't worry too much about it. It's more important to encourage them not to volunteer. Farmer J, if you were an advisor to the first high warlord of the American Redoubt post-collapse, what laws and edicts would you recommend to encourage the good, the beautiful, and the true? I would look back to historical Roman law and to the Codex of Justinian. Those were laws that allowed societies to prosper for a long time. And so that's what I would begin with. Obviously, I would bring in some very strict laws regarding who's permitted to own property, who's permitted to have any political influence, etc., because that was the mechanism that was used to destroy things in the West. Probably need to bring back laws. The Western civilization was built on the illegality of usury and blasphemy. So that's probably where you want to begin. We have a super chat. Cordell, thank you. No, the booster patrol is not done yet. I haven't even, my voice has been, as you can hear, my voice has been messed up for the last month. So, but hopefully one of these days. Thoughts on the No Man's Sky game fiasco? They've added everything they claimed they would at launch. I haven't paid any attention to No Man's Sky, so I have no thoughts on it. I'm sorry. I'm vaguely aware that there was some stuff going on, but I've been a little busy over the last year and a half. So no, I can't I can't give you any opinion there. My apologies. CXP says if E equals mc squared and D equals RT, does this mean that the amount of energy required to pass through a certain amount through a certain mass acts as a measurement of a different kind of distance? No, it does not. Real People says, is Dune science fiction? Yes, absolutely 100%. It's not only science fiction, it's probably either the absolute height or the relative height of science fiction. Darth Previous says, or wants to know, how would you go about tactfully addressing the naked bloodlust our family, friends, and coworkers are showing for Russians before it's turned on the next narrative target? What I would do is I would say, gee, that's pretty intense. Do you think that about blacks too? I mean, it seems to me that they've done more harm to us here in the States than the Russians have. Or insert your sensitive ethnic group of choice. It's a bit ironic that it's been determined that saying anything negative about Japs or Jews or blacks is anathema, but you can say all the things, which are all groups that were historically in opposition to Heritage America, but it does look like suddenly they're saying, well, now it's okay to say horrible things about these people. So I think that gently pointing out their total hypocrisy on the issue is probably the best way to draw attention to it. I mean, I'm not a big fan of whataboutism. When conservatives, well, can you imagine if liberals did this, or if conservatives did the same? That doesn't work. But this is a different situation. These are people who claim they oppose bigotry, claim they oppose attacks on ethnic groups, literally being bigoted and attacking an ethnic group. So, another super chat from Cordell, thank you. Not a question, but Owen says to pay the gay away. Can we pay the retardery away on the Darkstream? Absolutely. This is the only place on the internet where you can actually pay the retardery away. Or for those of you who need things even more simple, can pay the retard away. But don't feel any obligation to. You're smart people. You don't have a lot of excess retardery, I hope. So perhaps these questions will prove me wrong. I don't know, but let's find out. Laramie says, baby metal is fantastic. Indeed. Do any flags come up for you in regards to their mythology and themes? I don't know what you're talking about. He says, wearing a baby metal shirt. Yeah, of course. I mean, number one, you just look at their kitsune is actually very similar to the devil horns that you see known occultists like Lady Gaga and Helen Mirren and so forth. It's very similar. Is that intentional? Probably, at least in part. But I don't know. The fox, the fox sign could be could predate the one by centuries for all I know. They also have some very, very, you'd almost call it anti-Christian, except for the fact that they're clearly Japanese and have no idea. So initially, early on, they actually had like the three girls coming up literally on crosses. But, is that just, Japanese paganry, or is it, something deeper and darker? The thing is that it doesn't generally have that. Oh, then also look at the masks that the commie band wears. So, I think that those are things that are a bit questionable. But also, if you want to go further, I believe that one of the concert choreographers is a high-level choreographer who has done some of the global type event choreography. So there's definitely some things that you would raise a few eyebrows at. On the other hand, if you listen to the music, it doesn't give you those kind of negative vibes. If you bother reading the translated words, the music, the lyrics are often quite positive. I mean, what is it? Whatever Dame Zatai, it's a Dame Zatai. It's basically a speed metal version of saying, "Be nice to people." It's actually remarkably benign for a what purports to be a metal band. It's not. Their themes are not dark. So, but we like what we like. Mosley Bear says, do you have a guess as to how long it will take for the North American continent to return to order following the breakup of the USA? Well, if you look at how long these processes take, I think you're probably looking at something on the order of 20 to 50 years. It's not going to be quick. Obviously, it's going to be different in one part to another. It's going to be very different in upstate New York than in the wilds of North Dakota. So, but it's going to take a long time because this has been the biggest movement of peoples ever seen in history. And the invasion of the United States is the biggest invasion that has ever taken place in history. So it can't resolve very quickly, in my opinion. CCCP, if you were having a baby in 2023, what would be on your vaccine schedule, if anything? Absolutely nothing. At this point in time, you can't even trust that the doctors are going to actually give you what they say they're giving you. The level of dishonesty, the level of distrust required of the industry is so high that there's nothing that's worth it. We already know that most of the vaccines that they want to give children are totally unnecessary. A kid doesn't need a hepatitis vaccine. Frake sends a super chat. Thank you. Dwarf Fortress did finally get some graphics. Saw you mention it. Yeah, I knew they were working on some about, 8 years ago, 10 years ago. So that's cool that they did finally do that. I doubt they're state of the art, and I very much doubt they need it. But I'll have to check that out at some point. Back when I played it was only ASCII. Will wants to know, what's your best advice for someone who believes in God but agnostic about Christ as Son of God? What could push them to be a true believer? What evidence should convince them? My best advice for someone who believes in God is to ask them what else and or who else gives them any means to oppose evil. What could push them to become a true believer? I think seeing someone's life transformed through the power of Jesus Christ and through a relationship with Jesus Christ. I saw how some of my friends' lives changed Not necessarily big things, but significant things. And it made an impact. What evidence should convince them? Evidence of changed behavior and evidence of evil being defeated. The main reason that people can't deny Jesus Christ is because he is literally the only thing that evil fears. And once you see that, it's very, very difficult to deny it. Tranquilitas wants to know is Switzerland still a GMO food-free country? Yes, as far as I know. They're stricter than ever. However, they do permit more food imports than they used to. But that's why a lot of Swiss people just refuse to buy Hungarian chicken or French beef. If you buy Swiss-made food, you can be quite confident that it's not GMO modified in any way. And I believe they'll be passing more laws, to prevent the GMO modified food from even coming into the country. Kiyosaki Bears wants to know, my dad has a female 2-year-old boxer Ridgeback mix. Wow, that sounds fun. That is lonely and only partially trained. Would adding a Vizsla puppy to the mix be healthy for her? Yes. If so, what gender? I would go with another female. I think that she'll be very happy. We have 3 female Ridgebacks, and they're quite happy to have their pack. So I think that if your dad's puppy is lonely, find a sister for her. Hausfrau has a second question, or as the legend Chuck Dixon would say, a double spin. He does it in a much more animated and interested way. We're not gonna copy that. But what is the federal government planning to do with the hordes of foreigners they are importing and setting up across the country? Well, my belief is that that's actually the war that Americans are going to face. I think that you hear a lot of people saying they're going to go to war with Russia as a distraction. It's going to be a nuclear war with Russia to distract them from all the bad things, to distract the American people from all the bad things they've done. No, they're not. It's not going to happen. And even if nukes are real, which they probably are, even if they still work properly, which they probably don't, it's not going to happen because the powers that be who are losing their power have no more desire to get nuked than anybody else. Nobody wins in that situation. They don't get to rule over anybody in that situation. I would think that a much better distraction would be, I don't know, give a whole bunch of weapons to a whole bunch of invaders. Don't you think that would keep people more occupied? That's my opinion. So I think that is what is the plan. Now, whether that works or not, in any way, shape, or form, I don't know. But you can be certain that there are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of Chinese operatives who will disrupt and disturb once things kick off in the South China Sea. It would be foolish to assume that no one else is going to be involved in that capacity for one reason or another. And this isn't This isn't, any sort of crazy conspiracy thing. This is what always happens when people move in. It happened to Rome. It happened to Byzantium. Look up sometime the movement of peoples. It's basically, this is why this country got invaded and is now called something else. So, Minion wants to know how long before the U.S. military has an actual effective drone doctrine and supply, before or after it's too late. I would say probably never, and definitely after it's too late. They're so far behind Iran, Russia, China, Turkey. The production processes just aren't there, and the drones that they do have are effective, but they're very expensive. Meanwhile, Russia is manufacturing them and handing them out to the troops in these huge stacks. I've seen, if you read Simplicius, he's got pictures, and I think his most recent article, of just these huge stacks of drones that they're providing and are being manufactured very cheaply. Even on the Ukrainian side, if I recall correctly, they're manufacturing like cardboard drones. So, in an industrial age, industrial war requires industrial sized processes. And the U.S. has completely dismantled its various plants, its war-making capabilities, and the demographics are not favorable. Rosie the Riveter had an IQ of 100 to 105. If you're going to bring in Shaniqua and Juan and, pick your Indian name, you're dealing with people who are 10 to 15 IQ points lower. They're not going to be as effective. You're not going to train them up quickly. J-Dubs says, what's your take on precious metals manipulation on the COMEX futures market? Couldn't care less. They've literally been doing it for, as long as I've paid attention to it. So, invest in markets at your own risk. Remember, you're playing their game. Doesn't mean you can't win. Doesn't mean you can't, make a few bucks here and there, but, it's a stacked game. Keep that in mind. Not Daredevil asks, what sort of music did you like playing for your kids growing up? Well, that's probably a better question for them, but I basically tried to play generally happier music, the old Disney stuff, some classical stuff. I never played, I didn't listen to like Disturbed and those sorts of things around them when I was young. Certainly not, no rap or anything like that. It wasn't a big deal. And my wife certainly just, listened to her. My kids pretty much grew up listening to the same music that I grew up listening to because my wife listens to the same classic rock that they were playing all the time when I was young. So, so I think that they had somewhat a similar musical childhood to mine. But I did attempt and spend some time attempting to you just give them some basics in the classical music, so they could tell the difference between Mozart and Beethoven, and nothing nothing homeschoolish per se, but just at least help provide a taste for it. And I think it was to at least some extent successful. Nuclear Llama. Will France's exit from Niger endanger its uranium supply in the region? Yes. If so, how do you expect France EU to respond to further energy shortages? I don't know how anyone could possibly express an opinion considering how totally irrational the EU's actions have been. If you look at the way that Germany responded to the U.S. destruction of the oil pipeline, you look at the way that they've actually gone further in the green direction as their electricity runs out. I expect them to respond foolishly and in a self-destructive manner. Chief Beef. Which trade is most likely to get someone through the depression and breakup? Concierge, handyman, beef sales, or cybersecurity? Beef sales. People always need food. MC says, I can't pronounce these, homoousios or homoiousios. What that refers to is Jesus the same substance as God, or is he a similar but not exactly the same substance as God? My response would be, depends when you're talking about. I think that in his full manifestation, he's of the same substance as God. I think it's also possible that all of our souls are part of the same substance as God. But it's pretty clear that since we believe Jesus died on the cross and we don't believe that God died, then at some point, there had to be a distinction. So, I mean, if I have to choose between the two, I choose same substance, but I think there's considerably more to it than that. Needless to say, it's probably a good thing that I wasn't around living in Byzantium in those times, because I'm pretty sure I would have gotten myself in a lot of trouble. Nickname asks, why would the powers that be leave Constantinople to the Saracens? It can little more be protected against Europe than Hong Kong can be defended against China. Why would they do that? Well, I don't think they had an option. The Turks went all the way to Vienna. So, I don't think that the powers that be had anything to do with it. I think that it couldn't be held. So, could Europe take it back? Well, not now. It's too demoralized. So, Frake is a super chat. Thank you. Thoughts on the other Ender books worth reading? Xenocide is really good. The others are just, candy. They're worth reading if you don't expect too much. They're mildly entertaining. But, if you just left it at Ender's Game and Xenocide, you'd probably be fine. Holtz would like to know, how do you think your life would have turned out if you had not read the Stoics at a young age? I don't think it would have made much of a difference. Most of the decisions that I made that affected the direction that I took had nothing to do with Stoic philosophy. I do think that Stoic philosophy made me more successful with the opposite sex because it prevented me from getting butthurt or bitter in circumstances where that could have happened. But with regards to my decisions about my occupation, where I lived, and so forth, it didn't have a great deal of impact. Scotch Girl asks, what do you think of the Comte Saint-Germain? Fanciful stories? Or is there something more there, like what the evil elite are trying to achieve? I think there's possibly something there. There are clues that there are people of great longevity living before us in the biblical days. The Bible doesn't say that everybody's, going to kick it at 70. And so it's possible that there's more to it. I don't take it too seriously, but I do view historical anomalies as possible clues that, possible cracks in the mainstream narrative. And in fact, some of those stories were actually quite an influence on a certain character that you can probably guess in A Throne of Bones. Magnus Cassius says, Stephen Wolfram interviewed Nassim Nicholas Taleb, and they used Mathematica to talk about economics. What software do you use to explore economics and or symbolic logic? None whatsoever. I use spreadsheets when I'm doing my analyses, and that's all. I don't particularly find symbolic logic very useful. I think most symbolic logic is used, especially in economics, to make things look more scientific and to create an easy jargon that allows the practitioners to feel smart and special and exclude others from a conversation that is perfectly understandable if they were interested in being understood. Hans Gruber asks, how often do you think about the Roman Empire? Probably a lot less than you think, mostly because I am much more deeply read in history than most people, and so time that others would think repeatedly about the Roman Empire, I might be thinking about Han Japan, I might be thinking about Turkish culture, the Mayans, the Inquisition, and so forth. That being said, I do think about the Roman Empire probably 4 times a week, unless I'm working on a Sea of Skulls, in which case I'm delving into Roman history a lot for obvious reasons. Most recently, I think I can even show you if I take the time here. Let me save something real quick, and then I can show you something. I was actually thinking about the Roman Empire last night and today, very actively. And the reason was pretty simple. I think you'll grasp in a moment. Oh, maybe I already nuked that. Let me see if I can find this. Let's see here. Nope, I did not. anyhow, we're working on Volume 8, Junior Classics, and one of the cover images that we're considering is Caesar crossing the Rubicon. So naturally it came up. Another super chat from Cordell. We'll have to stage an intervention here at some point soon. Uneducated economist on YouTube throws around the Cantillon effect a lot. Is it a worthwhile theory? I've read Cantillon. I'm not sure at the moment. Well, let me look it up. Let's see. This has been dubbed his theory. Yes. The French economist. Oh, okay. No, this is, yeah, okay. This is, when you print more money, it causes more pounds to chase fewer goods, pushing up the inflation. It's not that significant. I mean, to a certain extent, it's a truism, but it's not that significant because you're dealing with a debt currency. You're dealing with a debt economy. The whole money supply chasing goods and services is almost totally irrelevant. I would not waste any time whatsoever on it. Making debt available to people who can't afford products drives up prices way more than anything related to the money supply. I can prove this to you to your satisfaction very, very easily. Ask yourself this question: why have housing prices increased dramatically? Why have university tuitions increased dramatically? It's not because, there's less money chasing it. It's because far more debt has been made available to spend on it. So, I mean, as a general rule, if you're working off of, if somebody's attempting to work off of neoclassical or classical economics, they're missing the point. MC wants to know, what is the scriptural basis for Boydian theodicy? The Bible. I mean, I've spoken to Greg Boyd many times in the past, and Boydian theodicy is where the scripture meets logic. It's a bit ironic that Boyd actually, in some contexts, takes the Bible more literally than your most hardcore Calvinist. And so, Greg takes the Bible at its word when God expresses surprise or something. He doesn't have to define it away. How can, yep, I was scenting Calvinism here. How can it be reconciled with the word declaring the total sovereignty of God? Isaiah 45:7. Okay, first of all, Isaiah 45:7 doesn't say anything about God's total sovereignty. Nothing. Number two, you don't know what sovereignty means. Calvinism had to create an imaginary definition of sovereignty that doesn't apply whatsoever in order to justify the arguments that the Calvinists want to make. Okay, let's look it up. Isaiah 45:7. Okay. I form the light and create darkness. I bring prosperity and create despair, or create disaster. I, the Lord, do all these things. Let's go to the King James just for the traditionalists. I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. Okay. Now, you can see where they get they develop they apply their logic to it, and they come up with the conclusion that this is total sovereignty. That's not what it says. It says God does these things. Where does it say that only God does those things? Where does it say that no one else can do anything at all? It doesn't. My fundamental problem with Calvinism, and the reason that I, tend to mock it openly, although I've got friends and colleagues who are Calvinists, I respect their opinions, but and you can read the debate, the great Calvinist debate on the blog years and years ago. I asked the smartest, most well-versed Calvinists to come up with what they considered to be their best arguments. I was not impressed with them. Basically what it comes down to, if I had to boil my critique of Calvinism down to a single sentence, it's this: the fact that a sentence can be read one way is not proof that it is the only way it can be read. So, Vortex asks, mainstream narrative and some counterculture always advise of the imminent financial ruin of China. What are they purposely missing? Well, they're applying a outmoded and inaccurate and obviously wrong economic model to a very large country to which it doesn't apply. GDP and China are almost totally irrelevant. And also, financial ruin is not ruin. It doesn't matter if a bunch of companies go bankrupt. Do you know who is one of the biggest shareholders, corporate shareholders, in all of China? It's the People's Liberation Army. Do you think it's really going to make a bit of difference if they don't have money to throw around when they have 1 million troops? The financial economy is not real. The financial economy does have an effect on the real economy. We're now at a situation where the financial economy is a total parasite on the real economy and is actually harming it. The same way that economic sanctions on Russia actually made Russia stronger, the total financial ruin of China might actually make China stronger, not weaker. Keep that in mind. So what they're missing is that the financial economy is not the real economy. Katerian asks, can you recommend any books that describe a post-collapse situation? A Canticle for Leibowitz? Maybe that blog post that the guy who survived the Balkan breakdown wrote. So, Plain Simple Ludwig, who's apparently very, very humble, says, to your knowledge, is there such a phenomenon as mass formation Dunning-Kruger? No. Dunning-Kruger is a pretty specific, individual concept. I don't buy into the mass formation stuff. That's smart boys trying to trying to be smart. What is your opinion of the Chicago plan? The physiocratic platform banking, how to end the Fed and eliminate fractional reserve banking. I think it's a halfway measure. It's an attempt to remove debt currency without going to the without going to the limits of commodity pricing. I don't think it's very practical because there's absolutely no way that the people who benefit so greatly from debt money are going to permit anything like that any more than they're going to permit a return to the gold standard. So, also, I think it's just as easily corrupted. The advantage of commodity money is that it's harder to cheat. I think it does theoretically, potentially, solve some of the problems of debt money, but I don't think it's an absolute answer. I don't think frankly, I don't think there is an absolute answer. Would it be better than the debt money situation? 100%. But it, is it a practical thing? I mean, to me, it's one step above writing utopian societal plans. Beethoven Bear, is God actually real? Yes. Or is it good enough to say that Homo sapiens evolved our religions and they are useful enough just as a bird's nest is to a bird? No, it's not good enough because Homo sapiens, to say we evolved our religions doesn't even make sense. How would a religion be evolved? What mutation modified what RNA or DNA and got fixated in the population? That's what you're talking about there is it's pseudoscience, but it's also pseudo-logic. It sounds logical, it sounds sensible, but it's actually nonsense. God is real, and you deny that at your peril. Michael asks, is there an estimated timeline for a Sea of Skulls print edition? Yeah, we're probably going to get the ebook out in probably 2 weeks or so. If I can find the time to just get it out to the initial readers here. So that's, but we're going to get the ebook out, do a couple rounds of, implementing people's typo fixes and so forth, because when you're dealing with a 900-page book, it doesn't matter if you have 3 proofreaders go through it. You're still they're gonna still miss a bunch. But we sort of crowdsource from the hardcore fans, then we go to print, and then we go to leather. So print, I would hope we could do it before Christmas. That would be the goal. Get it out before Christmas. Reactionary Programmer. On the fractal nature of the SSH, the sociosexual hierarchy, under what circumstances does a gamma not act as a gamma, i.e. taking responsibility or admitting a mistake? Probably when he doesn't feel that there's any cost or consequence to doing so. If he's in a situation where he's comfortable enough socially that he doesn't feel like it's going, so if he's with a close friend that he's relaxed enough with, he might be able to admit a mistake. But he's probably not going to be as able to in a public situation, in a professional situation, and so forth. Tanton J wants to know, what is better, Cinnamon Toast Crunch or French Toast Crunch? Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Harry says, did Alt Hero Q call it or what? Absolutely. It's kind of interesting that Chuck was getting flack for Alt Hero Q. People should have been amazed by the fact that he actually predicted the Russian-Ukrainian war. Where did the insight come from? Well, I think that when he was looking at the scenarios, he was well aware of the maiden coup and so forth, and he knows who is behind it, and so I think that link probably suggested itself fairly naturally. Den Blonde Ulven. How does one morally participate in a system that is fundamentally evil? As little as possible and as necessity dictates. One man is not going to change the global financial system by refusing to utilize money. We live in a fallen world. We're told to be in, but not of the fallen world. So be in it. You have to participate in it. You have no choice. But how you participate in it is what matters. I tell everyone, use cash. Every chance you get. If a store requires you to use a card and stuff, don't go there. Find an alternative. Support the people that, choosing the lesser evil in some circumstances is better. I mean, when the option is what? Choosing the greater evil? But, there's different ways to participate. Don't take on debt. Don't become a usurer. Chris wants to know, a child wants to learn to play guitar. Is there an instrument that would be beneficial to learn before? I would assume that learning piano first might not be a bad idea, just because you'll learn how to read music and so forth. But if John Bradley or Hawk or somebody disagrees, then listen to them. They're good guitarists. I'm not. How does the situation in Armenia Caucasus play out? Another abandonment by the West? Well, it's already pretty much played out. The Armenians in Azerbaijan lost, and there will probably be the most significant ethnic cleansing that we've seen since the 90s, and they will all. The Armenians have already said we'll take them. So hopefully that will go as peacefully as possible. But that's on the Armenians. They chose to rebel against the Azerbaijan government, which was the state power there. So anyhow, it appears that there's not likely to be too much nonsense taking place there, because the Azerbaijanis were able to bring an end to the conflict and force a surrender very quickly. Farmer Grady wants to know, what would be the foremost pitfall to avoid if someone wanted to run an only good books bookstore? You're not going to have enough customers. Most people like reading, terrible stuff. Just mind candy, pointless romances, etc., etc. I don't think that you can reasonably do that. And also, bookstores are not profitable these days. Hawk says, just go for guitar and use piano to teach theory after they're comfortable with the guitar. Yeah, so there you have it from the guitars. Uh, Zastavnik. How would you rate the book Dictionary of the Khazars? I've never read it, so I wouldn't. Squirrel Bear. Do Audis get their own rank on the SSH? No. Cyclocerus. Is there a timeline for doing another run of Castalia Library books, Aristotle Rhetoric? No, other than we're going to get going on. We're getting a lot of stuff caught up here. And so we're going to get the second edition of Meditations out first, see how that goes. If they sell decently, then we'll bring the others back too. If they don't, we won't. I mean, it's all very simple. The project has to support itself, and so we're not going to be doing books just to have a stack sitting around that people aren't interested in. What do the Chinese think about the Africans? They're not very positive. They hold them in great contempt. If you look up the documentary "The Empire of Dust," that should give you a pretty good idea. Sculpture Bear, were there any plot stories in Alt Hero Q abandoned or rewritten after the start of the Ukraine war? Not a single one. The whole thing was written ahead of time. It's all done. Issue 6 is done. It's just a matter of getting it into print. Higgs wants to know, will the Castalia History subscription steer away from or not rule out narrative nonfiction? We'll probably steer away from it. I prefer less interpretation and more straight recounting of facts. Plus, there's so many classics that we have to get through anyhow. We're not likely to do a lot of stuff like Shelby Foote's The Civil War. Captain Cojones. Or is it Cojones? How long will the Ukrainian people accept the Zelensky regime? Not much longer. Since they are being killed by the thousands, is there even a moment they will rise up and resist? There have been rumors that it's already happening. The numbers of surrenders on the battlefield have increased noticeably. I don't think it's an accident that Zelensky keeps having top officials arrested, fired, etc., etc. That's usually indicative of a regime that is very shaky. So it could happen at any time. I mean, frankly, I'm a little surprised at the level of hatred and fear of Russia that has allowed the Zelensky regime to go on as long as it has. So I would not be surprised in the least if the Zelensky regime was gone before the end of the year. I'm not predicting that. I mean, I'm just saying that it's very clear. It's very clear, I'm sure, to the Ukrainian people now that, number one, they can't win a war against Russia, and number two, the current regime is perfectly happy to fight to the very last Ukrainian. Tommy wants to know, what are the differences between computer game design and board game design? So do we have another 3 hours? The main difference is that board game design is much, much simpler. The main difference is computer game design has to account for the computer having a strategy, moving the parts, etc., etc. Board game design, you can leave it up to the player. That's the biggest difference. Also, computer games tend to have they're much more expensive because the art requirements for computer games tend to be higher. Rick wants to know, what is the ETA for the Iliad? No idea yet. We're not there yet. Right now we're trying to, we got the stamp in. I think, actually, you guys haven't seen this. We are working on getting the methods perfected, and the stamping, in other words. So, I mean, it would astonish you some of the stuff that we've been learning and dealing with. I have no idea where I put that picture. Anyhow, it's on the blog. That you know, the stamps, and I can show you this at some point in time, they're actually taped onto the foil stamping machines. They literally put them on there with, you can see the backs of them. They're all, covered with the residue of the tapes. We scrubbed them off to clean them off. So I thought that this is just insane, because it's why one book stamps perfectly clean and the other one doesn't. So what we've done is we had a jig made so that it ensures the perfect centering of the thing on the bottom. Now we need to have one made for the top. So we'll get there as soon as we can. I'm not going to rush it in order and then put out a subpar quality product. Sam Iskander, your thoughts on the 1853 to 6 Crimean War? Pretty close to non-existent, but let me see if I can answer your question. Why did the UK side with the Turks? Because the UK always attempts to side with the weaker power. Russian scholars point to Vatican meddling, but no accessible books in English. Britain's strategy on the continent of Europe was very, very clear. They always took the side of whoever they felt was weaker. So I assume that they believe that the Turks were the weaker power. They wanted to deny Russian possession of the warm water ports. Ergo, they sided with the Turks. I could be wrong. That's just my opinion. Long Game Bear, have you ever read something by Vargas Llosa? And if so, what do you think of it? I don't think so. Zach Log the Great says, would you speculate on the SSH rank of figures such as C.S. Lewis, J.R.R. Tolkien, or G.K. Chesterton? Chesterton, I would speculate, was a low delta. Lewis, I would speculate, was a high gamma. I think when he wrote about Eustace Scrubb, he was actually referring to himself. But I think that he's also an example of how Jesus Christ can use flawed instruments in ways that surpass their own beliefs and their own abilities. J.R.R. Tolkien, he was probably, based on what I've read, based on his things, I think that he was probably a Bravo. But, this is just speculation. I've actually been reading a lot of Chesterton recently because I'm reading The Complete Father Brown. And I was even thinking that it might be nice to do a Father Brown book for library, maybe combine two of the public domain ones. I think it's like the Secret of Father Brown and the Incoherence of Father Brown or something. I can't remember which it was, but the best stories seem to be in those two. So, Stoneguard the Gray, after completing all of your other projects in 20 years, would you be open to designing, publishing a TTRPG and a war game? Yes, we're actually working on some of this stuff now. So, but yeah, we've got RPGs to get done, and we've got war games to get done. So they're already on the list. Nibmeister, can Switzerland return to its non-aligned stance given that the country kowtowed to the greater American empire, put sanctions on Russia, and Russia now considers Switzerland an enemy like the EU? First of all, Russia does not consider Switzerland an enemy like the EU. It's no longer considered a friendly nation. But they also know that it's not the Swiss. It's, a few people in the Swiss government who are US owned or influenced. And so the Swiss people, the People's Party, which is the largest party in the country, are actively looking at putting formal neutrality into the Constitution and so forth. I think it's a very good idea. I think it's necessary. I'm quite confident that it would be forgiven for its brief breach of neutrality, because it was very clear that Switzerland was being dragged into it, if not forced into it. So, yes, it can return. Will it be trusted enough to become an arbiter again? We'll see. The thing is, I think that I think Switzerland's going to break with the neocons and the empire once it becomes clear that you don't play with Russia, you don't get to play with China. There's a lot of countries that they're willing to break with Russia, but they know they can't afford to break with China. Chief T, Satan cabal not this obvious since Sodom. Christians still want to infight instead of uniting against Satan. True and true. How to overcome? Lead by example. Don't engage. Don't infight. Don't expect perfection. Right? Gecko, how are you enjoying our paper American Pulisic and Musa on AC Milan so far? Very much. They still have a ways to go. Obviously, they got destroyed by Inter in the Derby, but there's some decent American players now. Chad says, young cousin I have a good relationship with, seriously dating a single mom, likely to marry her. Appreciate advice I can pass on. If you're taking on the role of the father, take it seriously. That's the main thing. There's obviously it's a complicating factor, but just do your best to do right by the kid. It's not his fault or her fault. Zach Log is another one. Once I finish the story, would Castelli have any interest in publishing The Mayor of Christ Mountain? Highly unlikely. We're extremely busy right now, and we're not considering submissions at this point. Lacey. She is my collaborator on Hypergamos, and she's done some great stuff for the Junior Classics. She says, do you think Canada will collapse and break up on a similar timeline as the USA? Possibly. I think that it's likely that Canada will end up breaking up in response to a US breakup. So I think that you'll have a little bit more warning. But either way, like somebody emailed me, they're like, do you think it's a good idea to, make a change now rather than wait? I said, well, it kind of depends where you are. He's like, well, I'm in Toronto. I'm like, just move. You do not want to be in Toronto. You do not want to be in Chicago. You do not want to be in any of those big cities right now. Asmus says, first sword when? When we get a programmer who would like to finish it. Have you read the Torah and the Quran? Yes. If so, what's your take on them compared to the Bible? Well, I mean, what's the best way to put this? If you're not convinced of the divine inspiration of the Bible, reading the Quran might convince you. What's his name? His brother, Hitchens. He was Christopher Hitchens. He was quite funny on the lack of literary quality of the latter. Have you read the Talmud? No, but Virtually nobody has read the Talmud. Any idea how long it is? Or tedious? Oh my gosh. I'd literally rather read legal decisions. I mean, basically, all you have to read to understand what the Talmud is, all you need to do is read one page. It's all, God said this, but this rabbi said that you can get around that by doing this. It's the whole thing. Ron Young, you predicted China would be Christian by century's end. I don't recall predicting it. I remember saying it. I thought it was possible. Where does the CCP fit? Converted, overthrown? I would say converted. Matador, what do you think about Jorge Luis Borges' works? I think that they're overrated, or I just don't get them. I mean, I appreciated the Labyrinth Library. I know he was a big made a big impact on Umberto Eco. I just don't see it myself, but you know, I've only read a few of them. I should probably read deeper. Gabriel Bear, should a couple in their early 40s still try for their first child? Yes. Is it too late? Maybe, but you'll never know until you try. Give it a shot. Baxter Bear, how does a Delta become the head of his own household? By getting married. How can he face the constant challenges from his wife? Just got to suck it up and deal with it. Can he have any prospects of getting respected? Yes. Honey Badger, by what age can you tell if a child will grow up to be dialectically retarded, aka someone one cannot instruct? I would say probably by the age of 10, although you'll probably still retain irrational hope until 15 or so, at which point it's just undeniable. But you do have to be remember that teenagers are, teenagers are stupid and narcissistic and have no experience of life. So sometimes that can be difficult to distinguish from being limited to the rhetoric. Inovan, favorite fruit or vegetable you've grown in your garden? I don't grow things. Favorite ornamental plant you've grown around your home? I don't grow things. This is not David the Goods channel. Go talk to David. He will give you more answers in greater detail than you can imagine. In 2019, you streamed Guard Your Hearts, It Is Coming. Do you think your friend's dream was a warning about the COVID tribulations? Well, I don't know. But in retrospect, it does appear to have been a warning, especially about the vaccines. Tom wants to know, does SSH correlate to the four temperaments? No. If not, what a phlegmatic alpha look like? A very laid back, confident alpha. I mean, it should be obvious that there's phlegmatic alphas. There's definitely, what's the word? Sanguinary alphas. They're orthogonal. Doc says, Messi is unique but getting older. True. Can another player be found and nurtured with his skill set? They can try. How much of it is nurture? I have no idea. But definitely some of it is nature. Where would you like to live during the millennium? Somewhere nice and peaceful and beautiful? I don't know. I don't even know how to answer that question. Big Chad Mungus says, at what percentages do diverse demographics become dangerous or worth moving away from? I would say 10%. But at 5%, you kind of know that you're going to have to. Paul wants to know, any thoughts on Unity's self-immolation and who might take their place in gaming? I think that it's obvious that they were bought by somebody or they got investment or something, and that they're being told to produce revenue. Uh, will they survive it? I mean, they've showed that they've learned something from the mistake. Um, I don't know enough about what the options are. You know, I haven't been dealing with the different engines for several years now, so um, I don't know what the options are. Hopefully they'll come back to their senses. Man McMahon, which non-American historical figures would be best suited to dealing with the problems that America currently faces or might face again in the near future? Well, I think that certainly Augustus Caesar would be a good choice. Um, there's no um, there's no easy way out of this, and a lot of very hard choices are going to be made, or a lot of hard choices are going to be avoided, and even worse consequences will be revealed. Francis wants to know, are you really good at math? I don't think so. I test very well at math. You know, I was in all the gifted math, blah, blah, blah. But I don't enjoy it, and I don't really, um, you know, calculus is just never something that really made much sense to me. You know, I can do it, but it doesn't click. Um, where I have an advantage is I have a natural understanding of statistics and percentages that most people don't seem to have, which tends to make it pretty easy for me with historical pattern type stuff. Um, Nitar, and in a lost early Darkstream, you explained how to jumpstart connect motivation and action to move forward, especially when caught in a rut. Could you explain it again? Not tonight. We're already over an hour and 15 minutes in. I am getting quite tired because I actually didn't go to bed last night. So we'll have to deal with that some other time. Or find the old Darkstream. Basement Home Brewer. How will China-India relations play into BRICSia? They'll work them out. Are they a stumbling block, or will they look past them to get rid of the dollar? They will work them out. There's too much at stake. China knows that India is not the main problem. India knows that China is not the main problem. You know, I think that it'll make things uncomfortable, but they'll be worked out sooner or later. Molten Cheese Bear. Can we watch you play soccer if we can autistically figure out where you play? No. And maybe shake your hand and pay our retardery away in person? Also no. There's a reason I don't do book tours and book signings and all that sort of thing. And you know, it has nothing to do with being controversial or the media hate or anything. I wasn't doing those things back when, you know, the media and the publishers all liked me. This is the sort of public interaction that I'm comfortable with. I'm not particularly interesting in person. I think you can ask pretty much anyone that, and it's like, oh yeah, he's mostly kind of sitting in the corner, you know, and uh, he'll have a long conversation with some of the guys about soccer. You know, I learned a long time ago that most people aren't interested in the things that interest me. So I can assure you the vast majority of people that I personally interact with have no idea what the SSH is, have never read any of my books. And that's fine, you know? I have no problem with that. Bulwark. he asks, how much time and effort do you spend imagining and organizing your thoughts on a book until you decide to start writing? Well, in some context, none at all. In other contexts, years. I don't do it formally. I don't sit there, working on stuff. I don't do outlines. But the thoughts do tend to percolate over time, and sometimes over a long period of time. Pyrrhus says, when the U.S. breaks up post-2033 per UN Armstrong, what does it break up into? We don't know. I mean, it could be 6 pieces. It could be hundreds of pieces. It depends upon the nature of the breakup. Cappuccino Bear, when the dust of the collapse settles in America, what region is most likely to keep some semblance of American values? I would say probably the Western Midwest. The Idaho, North Dakota, South Dakota. That would be my guess. ID Prism. We already did that. Erco8, do you listen for pleasure or focus while working to any organ music composers? If so, do you have a favorite piece? I don't have a favorite piece, but I do listen to a lot of Bach, and sometimes his organ stuff. Jose, are foreigners justified in invading white countries, given that the last time whites were left to their own devices, they became too powerful? No, they're not. It's harming both the invader and the invadee. You could say it's well deserved considering the whole colonial era and the white behavior then. You could say it's just desserts, but is it justified because whites will just become colonial? No, I don't think so. All right, we're coming to the end here. What would it take to get you to attend the Bertaria Times National Festival in 2024? Hold it in Europe, Western Europe. Colonel Troll, current status and outlook for Rebels Run. The current status is they're still waiting for Wolfgram's trial to begin. Restitution phase is after the trial, so the outlook is still, I think, dim, but still possible. Just depends on how much trouble he feels he's in and how many years he thinks he's going to get. Dindinger, why do you think book ownership is prized more in English-speaking countries than in Spanish ones? I suspect because of England being a Protestant country. Diogenes, would Castalia considering publishing an edition of Camp of the Saints? No, we don't have the rights. J-Dog, if you were given the rights to any video game franchise of your choice to develop and evolve as you wished, which would you choose and why? I'd have to go probably with Ultima. Just Warlords would be tempting, because I love Warlords, and I'm talking about the PC game from SSG, but Ultima is just so rich, has so much interesting stuff. I'm such a big fan of Richard Garrett. World of Warcraft would be tempting, but ultimately it's not really that deep or original. Let's see. JK Plan B. Vox, I was surprised when you told us Space Bunny uses Instagram and that you stumbled upon the tennis player's page when looking for it. What is good for thee is not good for me? I'm not Space Bunny. Why would you think that? I mean, the fact that I say don't use something doesn't mean that everybody listens to me. You know, I don't. I mean, I don't police my wife's social media decisions. You know, she managed to get kicked off Twitter all by herself. Cliff Cosmic just got here. Could you please start from the beginning, way back when you started doing Periscope? No. Paul, is there any possibility of some more Silenciosa? There's not a possibility. There's a 100% probability. We've already got a bunch done. I don't know what's holding it up. I mean, when I say done, I mean illustrated, colored, etc., etc. So, I mean, we've got a bunch of stuff that's done that I don't quite. I think it's the production team. We got a bunch of volunteers, but they were not quite as capable, I think, and so I think they're still being trained in and so forth. And finally, Snowman says, is conflict avoidance / thriving on comfort one of the main shortcomings of deltas? Conflict in the sense of standing up for himself and demanding respect, but more generally as well. Yeah, I think that conflict avoidance is probably one of the more self-limiting behaviors of the average delta. You know, deltas are very much, hey, go along to get along, which is great in accomplishing tasks. It's not great when you're dealing with a bully, when you're dealing with somebody who doesn't respect the hierarchy. You know, it's the bravos that are. I mean, a bravo is essentially a delta who can handle conflict. So, there's one DLive question here I'm going to take just because I think that's a good question. Does evil spring from weakness? No. No, I think evil springs from our own fallen nature and our own, pride. I think more evil springs from pride than from weakness, and I think that that's one reason why God specifically says He hates arrogance and He hates the proud. So, on that note, thank you all for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed this extended stupid question day on Box Day. This is the Darkstream.